This is the CIA, known for manipulating the world and shaping the world to its image. In this episode, we're looking at how it manipulated Americas and Europe. Before we start this video, I want to introduce you guys my passion project called Unknown History. It's a book about all the different unknown histories, and you can get it for a cheap price of $4.90, and it's just the first version of the book. The full version will have a lot more pages, but it's just more to support my channel and to help me produce more content for you guys. And without further ado, here's the video.
The CIA wanted to understand more about brainwashing. It had money and it was ready to fund experiments. And that's what led it here to the Allen Memorial Institute, then one of
Operation Northwoods. This was a plan by the CIA to launch terrorist attacks on America and on both civil and military targets on American citizens to justify and launch a full-scale invasion of Cuba. But why did they even want to do that in the first place? Well, in the eve of the Cuban Missile Crisis, where the Soviet Union wanted to give nuclear weapons to Cuba, which could then lead to Cuba launching nuclear bombs on the United States, Cuba became a real threat, and embargoes and economical sanctions were not enough. They needed a plan to destroy Cuba, and fast. Now, they drafted many plans, and Operation Northwoods was one of these plans. They would launch terrorist attacks on the United States themselves and then blame it on Cuba. Now, what did this plan consist of? Well, the first thing, they could sink a boat and then blame it on Cuba, and would also make these fake funerals, make it seem like there were a lot of people who were dead in the sinking of the ship. As well, they would attack US military bases and say that it was Cuba who did it instead of the US. As well, they would shoot down a CIA plane and make it seem that it was a passenger plane that was shot down by Cuba. And as well, they would send terror attacks in Miami and as well blame it on Cuba. Now, this is quite complicated. It's basically an espionage project on American citizens. But to simplify things, I'm only going to talk about two of the projects within Operation Chaos. And these projects are called Project Resistance and Project Merrimack. These two projects were about dismantling anti-war activists. Why were there anti-war activists? Well, it was not the Ukraine war. This time it was the Vietnam War, and there were many people against the war and against US intervention in the war. And CIA wanted to dismantle these anti-war activists and see if they posed any threats to the national security of the United States of America. Now, how would they even do that? Well, there was a lot of beef between the CIA and the FBI, because the FBI is like, oh no, that's our job to spy. And they're like, CIA is like, no, you know, I kind of want to do the same job as you. Well, it's not exactly how it happened, but you understand the concept of it. So the first project, called the Project Resistance, was about finding collaborators within these colleges and university ecosystems. This meant finding college administrators, collaborating with security guards within the campus, as well as local police enforcement. And with these collaborations, the CIA would spy on these anti-war activists and write down their names. I believe they had a database of 12,000 to 15,000 names. And ramps up was Project Merrimack, where they would find these anti-war activists, take pictures of them, take pictures of their license plates, as well as follow them back to their homes. Now, you may say, oh, you know, espionage, you know, that happens every day in America. Well, this is quite frightening because with the college aspect of it, you know, imagine you're just a university student, and you're just walking around and there's like a CIA agent like watching you and looking at every single move you're doing. You know, I believe that is quite frightening. Maybe the CIA is watching me right now. The Montreal Experiments. In the 1950s, the CIA would begin a series of human experiments in an attempt to try to turn Soviet spies into double agents, started manipulating the human mind into changing its way of thinking and, making people do things without their consent. Now, this was extensively done in the United States of America, and when a series of unethical experiments was exported to Canada, it was called the Montreal Experiments. Now, we will cover the US experiments in another video, but today I want to talk about what happened in Canada, in what we call the Montreal Experiments. In 1950s, Dr. Erin Cameron was given a job by the CIA to conduct unethical experiments in Montreal, in a very renowned university called McGill University. I actually had an application for McGill University, and they accepted me. Good thing I didn't go. No, I was kidding. It's no longer active, if you're wondering. What really happened in the Montreal Experiments? Well, most of the patients were who were depressed or had schizophrenia. And they went there because they thought that Dr. Erin Cameron would be the best doctor that would cure them and heal them from the disease. Instead, he made it much worse. His experiments would begin when the students would be administered a lot of drugs that would make them into a drug-induced coma. After they would be in a drug-induced coma, they would only be woken up to eat. Afterwards, they would be given electroshock therapy. An extremely painful electroshock would go through their brain and wake them up. Afterwards, they would be given drugs that would keep them awake, and they would listen to repeated and looped messages of "My mother hates me." Well, why would he even do that? Well, he believed in an idea called psychic driving. This is the idea that when you listen to the same message again and again and again, that you would suddenly, one day, begin to believe it. And that's also what the CIA wanted, right? They wanted them to manipulate the human mind for them to do things without their consent. And in this way, help the CIA. It was a win-win for Dr. Erin Cameron and the CIA. Through the experiment, the students were drugged, couldn't move, and had to listen to "My mother hates me" 16 hours a day. Operation GLADIO. This was a secret operation involving a secret army in Europe. At the end of World War II, many soldiers stayed and formed a secret army under Operation GLADIO. The goal of this secret army was to protect Europe from the Soviet Union in the forming of the new Cold War. Now, these secret soldiers would be used by NATO, but also by the CIA. Now, what would the CIA do? Well, one thing is the manipulation of the 1948 Italian elections. Now, this is the only thing we are sure of. According to Daniel Ganser, who is a very controversial author, he believes that this has not just happened in Italy, but also all across the world. Now, the problem and the reason why he's controversial is because he based a document that the CIA says is fake and a forgery by the Soviet Union. But if this document was proven to be real and not a forgery, it would mean that the CIA would intervene to all of these countries, rigged all of these elections in all of these countries under Operation GLADIO. Now, Operation GLADIO is not just elections. It's also violent and often very terrorist. Under Operation GLADIO, they would drop secret arms dumps all across Italy. These weapons could contain bombs, weapons, assault rifles, pistols, knives, and one of these GLADIO arms dump was used to perform a terrorist attack, and this is called the Peteona massacre, where 5 carabinieri had investigated a car, and the car exploded, and the source of the explosive was from a GLADIO arms dump. The CIA black sites, secret torture sites all across Europe and all across the world, where the US practices a very controversial practice called extraordinary rendition, which is the process of kidnapping someone from a different country and bringing them to your torture site. Now, why are there these torture sites? Well, after 9/11, the US began its war on terror. therefore beginning its massive interrogation of suspected terrorists, of which they would build black sites all across the world to kidnap these people and send them for interrogation. Now, how would they do the process that I said called extraordinary rendition? Well, imagine you're walking at night and then suddenly multiple men put a hood behind your head and then grab you and send you to what we call an extraordinary rendition plane. Well, this is the process, you walk in night and you're getting kidnapped and you're being put in a plane and sent to one of the CIA's many black sites. Now, once you arrive at these black sites, you also be put to a very controversial techniques called enhanced interrogation techniques. What that involves is many methods. For example, walling, which is basically bashing someone's head into a fake wall, waterboarding, stress position, wall standing, cramped confinement in a box, insult slaps, facial hold, basically grabbing the guy's face, attention grasping, forced nudity, sleep deprivation, vertically shacked,
Thank you so much for watching this video on the dark history of the CIA. And as always, thank you so much for your support. Al Mihai, Agrabin, Java City Coffee, Riley, Dilly, Elk, Lolo XL2, Tyler, Kyle, Alicia Math, Kyle, Audrey Weeks, Oliver, and yeah, thank you so much for your support. You really keep this content active. And yeah, I'll see you guys in the next video.